What's up, guys? Joined again by special guest and friend Greg Gabriel. Greg, it's July 4th weekend. We're kind of in the downtime of Bears talk and everything, but what's going on with you and how are we doing today?
Well, I'm in the process of smoking some ribs.
Ooh,
And you were
ribs.
kind enough to adjust the time on this so I could work it in, because you got to really watch it carefully, because if the smoker gets too hot, you can burn them. So I got to keep it at 225. I got to watch it. And, this is an older smoker. It's an old Smoky Mountain, which works really, really well. But you can't. The newer ones are all digitized, and you can set the heat at 225 and not worry about it. Well, I got to worry about the heat on this. If it gets too hot or not hot enough or whatever, so then you got to adjust the air vents. But I enjoy it, and I can't wait to eat those suckers in about 3 more hours.
In about 3 hours, man. That's something to look forward to. Do you have is the wife in town then for the weekend?
Yeah.
Oh,
She's
awesome.
been here. She's been here for a week.
Okay, good. I didn't know if she was going back to Detroit or if she was back.
No,
not,
she's
so.
No, she's not going back to Detroit. She might go Saturday because she's back to work Monday. She's either going Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning.
Yep, for sure. Is there any Bears news this week that you've heard or anything popping off that you wanted to talk about?
Actually, that's good news when there's no news. That means
is.
nobody got in trouble. So that I always felt that this time between the off-season program and the beginning of camp is worry season. You just got to worry everybody. They don't get hurt. They don't get in trouble. Remember Jason Pierre-Paul blew half his damn hand off on the 4th of July, man. Playing with fireworks. Some of it's stupid stuff. And you just worry about that stuff. The last thing you want to do is get a phone call at 2 a.m.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And there's been a couple other NFL stories around. Some players have gotten into trouble. Luckily, knock on wood, no Bears players yet. What we're looking for this time are players. Usually around this time last year, we did get a couple reports of players working out together. I think this is the time where we might see over the next week or two, maybe Caleb Williams will get together with, I doubt Luther Burden will be there if he doesn't have his contract signed, but maybe he'll get together with Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, maybe Cole Kmet will go out there. We could also see the defensive line get together for a workout. Maybe Joe Tooney or Drew Dahlman will put something together for the O-line. Probably not as likely, but we could see something like that over the next
lot of
week.
times it's skill people, and sometimes you could even get the offensive backs or the defensive backs from the receivers going against each other. Everything's just run by the players. At times, the players will go to some exotic place and do it, and maybe work in the morning and then party at night. I know Aaron Rodgers is supposedly someplace in California with the Pittsburgh receivers, but now you got the holiday tomorrow, so they're not going to be doing anything anyway. So I would think if they get together, if they haven't gotten together, it'll be next week.
With our draft picks not being signed and Colston Loveland still not being 100%, we most likely won't see those two guys there. And you can also rule out Ozzie Trapillo, but I'm looking forward to Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze connection growing. I think Rome Odunze is probably one of the most underrated players on this roster right now. A lot of people are overlooking the guy who was a top 10 pick last year. I had him. I think he was just as special as Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, but he seems to have gotten kind of lost in the shuffle that was the Bears' bad offense last year. Some people seem to have lower expectations for a guy who I think is going to be a stud in the NFL. How do you feel about Rome Odunze going into year 2?
Well, I feel like you do, but one of the things, the situation Rome walked into versus the situation Neighbors and the other guy went into, Marvin Harrison went into, where they had to be wide receiver number 1 at their particular clubs, where Odunze didn't have to be. I already had DJ.
And we had Keenan Allen. We signed Keenan Allen as well.
So the situation was different. And so the numbers came out a lot differently. And that doesn't mean, that's not taken away from his talent. It's letting a rookie be a rookie and not putting too much on his plate. a career isn't made in a rookie year. A career is going to be made over time. I'm not worried about him. What I liked about him, just seeing him in person, seeing him do some interviews, was he looked like he chiseled up his body some during the off season. His face was actually thinner. He's gained weight, but lost body fat and is a lot leaner. I don't know if you saw it when I was doing the show with Aldo the other day. Somebody brought it up. When you go to the Bears website, you bring up the roster. All those weights are different than they have been.
Yeah,
like
they updated them.
Billings is at 340. Bill Murray, the guard, who was supposedly like 305 last year, they got him at 323.
Oof.
But so I wonder how accurate those are. We never, when I was there, we never used to give the weights of the players to PR, so they were almost playing a guessing game. And the players had to weigh in really during camp on a daily basis because you wanted to keep track of how much weight they were losing during the course of a practice. And if they needed, to have extra fluids or whatever. So you kept strict control of it. But as far as getting fined for being overweight, they do that every couple weeks. And what the Bears have done really since Rusty Jones has been there, they've used the bod pod to measure body fat. And so not only do you have to be at a certain weight, you got to be at a certain percentage body fat, and you can be heavy. So let's say you got an assigned weight. We'll just make up a number. You're assigned a weight of 315 pounds and you come in at 318. But if your body fat percentage is okay, then the 318 means nothing. You're not considered overweight because then you got good weight. So it works both ways, and it's a way of keeping the players involved with the nutrition aspect of the game. And that's one of the big differences. Most kids coming out of college, especially linemen, are fat because they just don't eat right. They might not think they're fat, but once they get really measured correctly, they find out that they are. They might think they're 10% or 8% or whatever, and they find out they're 3 or 4 or 5% more than that when you get an accurate read on what the percentage of body fat is. So it's an interesting tool. I always kept track of it. I would check the players' weights every single day and just check it to make sure. I had to report it to Jerry, obviously, as did Rusty, but it was just a way for me to really be involved with what they were doing.
But one of the things, Rome Odunze actually talked about it himself, and he said when he got into the NFL last year, guys were more chiseled up than he expected and he experienced in college. And that's because, that's their job. When your job is to be a football player, these guys, with the advancements in weight training and the money teams put into it now, a lot of these guys train all off season and get bigger, faster, and stronger. And Rome put time into building his upper body up this off season. Rome was in awesome shape coming out, very athletically anyway, but he put more work into his upper body. That should help him against the more physical corners in the NFL, and he could have a breakout season this year for sure.
Yeah, I expect big things. What the numbers are going to be, who's going to know? And there's so many talented, skilled people on this team that, where's the ball going? And that, I think, remains to be seen. Within the offense, you're going to have to keep a lot of people happy. So the ball's going to be tossed around a lot. But at the same time, you look at the number of runs a Ben Johnson offense had the last 2 years in Detroit, they do run the ball a lot.
Yeah, and I do think we might pass the ball a little bit more here in Chicago than he did in Detroit, where they had David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and that was awesome 1-2 combo at running back. We don't have quite that talent at the running back position right now, and we have a lot more talent than they did at wide receiver and tight end, especially when
they had one wide receiver. They had Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's it.
So
I take that back. They had Williams, but he was been off and on as far as with injuries and stuff.
he missed his whole first season, that
Right,
ACL, most of
right.
it.
And then they got the tight end, but they don't have anywhere close to the depth that the Bears have at the wide
Yeah.
receiver position.
So it makes me think when he talked about it, Ben Johnson said he's not going to run the same offense he did in Detroit. We know that he's going to tear it down to shreds. He also has a more athletic quarterback here with Caleb Williams compared to Jared Goff. So I expect more passing, probably a little bit more RPOs mixing in the run play to get
Mm-hmm.
Caleb, get those little mesh points and get Caleb out of the pocket as well. But I think it's going to be creative. I think this offense is going to be fun to watch. Is there anything in particular you're looking forward to with Ben Johnson?
I'm really looking forward to seeing how he actually does it. You know, he said, I'm not running the same offense as Detroit. Okay. What does that actually mean? What's going to be interesting is that, you know, like Minnesota's the opening game. So
Monday night.
Their DC, the only thing he's got to go on is what Johnson did in Detroit. And so now he's got to, now, obviously they're going to do things differently, but how he calls plays, types of plays he calls in certain situations, those I think could be similar. And so he can construct his defensive play calling around the way that Ben ran the offense in Detroit, but the plays itself, I think, are going to be a lot different.
Yeah, 100%. And I think he's going to surprise people. I think it's going to be a very creative offense, and we can dig deeper into that at another time. One of the crazy stories going around is there's been talk of DJ Moore and Cole Kmet trade rumors, and I talked about the Cole Kmet thing, and people take it out of context. Look, I don't think there's any way we trade him this year. But let me ask you this question. When you look forward to 2026, there's an out in his contract. And depending on how much we use him this year and the fact that we just invested a top 10 pick at tight end, if a team were to offer the Bears, say, a third-round pick next year in the offseason, 2026, I think we'd have to take it. It comes down to a team actually making an offer like that. But do you agree that if we got offered a day 2 pick next offseason?
I personally, I wouldn't do it for a 3. And here's the thing. The majority of the tight ends, like 90%, coming out of college, can't block worth a damn. They're move tight ends, H back, U back, F back, however you want to call it, you know, depending on the terminology of the offense. And they're like Loveland. They're big wide receivers who run well, get open, make plays, but you can't play them in tight as a Y and ask them to block. Yeah, they're willing, but they don't have the size, the strength, the power to help the running game. Now, people go, well, Detroit's second tight end only had, you know, caught 14 balls or something like that. So what? They didn't have a guy that could catch the ball. You know, you got different personnel here. So it really gets down to more of what you're asking the player to do. And Kmet is a hell of a player. And who you going to, if you get rid of him, who are you going to replace him with? You're still going to have somebody who can sit in there and play the wide position.
Well, that's the counterpoint to that is what he did in Detroit and what he was able to do with guys he found on day 3 of the draft. As far as secondary tight ends go, he didn't need a second tight end that could catch the ball. And when you look at Sam Laporta, he was also a guy who wasn't a great blocker coming out of college. And Loveland is actually bigger than him. A lot of people consider him a bigger Sam Laporta, and they traded away TJ Hawkinson there. So there's a couple points and counterpoints to talk about when it comes to that. Is Cole Kmet really in the Bears' long-term plans? I think this year, of course, he is. But when you look at 2026 and beyond, I think Cole Kmet, his future in Chicago is questionable. DJ Moore, I think he stays in Chicago. But as far as Cole Kmet goes, I don't know. I think it's an interesting topic. And I think when you look into the future, Colston Loveland is going to be the future of the position. And
Cole here's how I argue that. And I understand exactly what you're saying. But my argument is they don't play the same position. The position has the same name, tight end. It ends right there because there's so many different variations of the tight end. There's so many different types of players that you use at the position. So if he wants to run the ball, he's got to have a blocker. You might get 2 or 3 halfway decent blockers coming out of college every year at the most.
But you're making the point there because he did that in Detroit. He went with the guy who wasn't a great blocker in Sam Laporta, and he ran that offense, and they did run the ball. And I don't even expect us to run.
Yeah, but he had another tight end who could block too.
Well, yeah, but we signed that.
And Laporta came from Iowa, which is a predominantly running team.
Well, Michigan that won the national title with Jim Harbaugh. That was a J.J. McCarthy ran team that they didn't pass the ball very much either, So it's a similar argument. It's the same thing. And when you watch,
but if you look at the number of plays that Loveland played in tight versus flexed out over the last 2 years, he wasn't in tight very much. He way more often than not was a flexed out tight end, and they were just playing with 5 across.
I do love it. I just love the conversation, but I think Cole Kmet's a part of this team, and I think this year we should have one of the best 12 personnels in football. But I think it's something that when we go into next offseason, I do think it's going to be a conversation to have. But I'm going to hold off on it for now because we're at least a year away from it,
Oh, I agree. And I the same thing. They just re-upped DJ last year.
Yeah.
It costs a lot of money to walk away from him.
When you look at guys with the longest contracts, I think DJ's contract runs as far as anyone's on this team right now, other than maybe since we just re-upped Kyler Gordon, he might be close, but DJ's longest future here is anyone.
How about this? I'm going to go in over the cap. I think right now, as the Bears stand for next year, they're over the cap.
Yep.
Right now.
It's crazy. I talked about it. We went from, and that's how Ryan Poles is all in, because we went from a team, we had nearly $100 million in cap space next year, and now spending on Dahlman and Tooney and the Kyler Gordon extension, the Jonah Jackson extension, the DJ Moore deal, the TJ Edwards deal, all these deals, and all of a sudden we're going to need to make some restructure.
As it stands right now, $4.6 million over the projected cap.
No, we can get under that. A couple of restructures.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's going to be players that are on the team now that aren't going to be on the team then.
Exactly.
That are going to clear money out. So I'm not worried about it. They're going to have money to spend, and they have yet to restructure a contract since, to get cap money since Poles has been here. He's left it alone.
Done it yet. Yeah. He's fixed the cap. So now he has all of that flexibility we've talked about over the last couple of years. He'll have to use a little bit of that next off season, but I also don't expect us to make any big splashes in free agency. I think the core roster we have right now, most of the starters we have right now should be the starters next year, unless they lose a job to injury or lose a job to a rookie. But I don't expect any major free agent additions next year. Maybe a couple, depending on how Tremaine Edmonds and Kevin Byard and a couple of these guys play out throughout the year. But are there any players, talking to that, are there any players you think off top of your head might not be here next year? Any names to watch out for?
I think it's way too early to even think about that because we got to see how they play within this new scheme.
Exactly.
Okay, take Tremaine Edmonds, for example. There's a lot of fans that are, hot on his ass.
Oh, yeah. They're all over him.
Okay, well, he might be playing Will this year instead of Mike. And that could make a big difference in his play alone. I mean,
he's so athletic. He's big, athletic.
This guy was a 4.51 when he came out at 250 pounds and 6'5".
And 6'5", 250, and can run a 4.5. He's crazy potential and upside.
And, his arms are so long he can tie his shoes without bending over.
In coverage, he can cover zones, he can cover tight ends, he can cover running backs, he can do so much. He can blitz. if Dennis Allen can unlock Tremaine Edmonds' potential, that would be huge, man. That would be
When he
huge.
was in Buffalo, because I watch every Buffalo game. There was a lot of times, game after game after game, when they, as a linebacker, would put him outside and have him coming off the edge, not lined up as an edge.
Yeah, just
but
lined up like in the slot. Yep.
And coming up and very successful at doing it. Maybe not get a lot of sacks, but get a lot of pressures and make the quarterback move. The guy, he's so damn athletic. I just think that maybe that scheme wasn't really conducive to his traits.
Yeah.
Because he was a far more productive player in Buffalo.
Eberflus was too passive, man. He was too conservative. And I think that played into the offense's struggles as well. Eberflus, I'm pretty sure he coached the offense to, hey, take a sack rather than turn the ball over. He did not want people to turn the ball over.
Trying not to lose games instead of trying to win them.
Yep. And you could see it in the way he coached, the way he played defense, the way he called games. We thought that adding Eric Washington last year and would make the defense a little bit more aggressive. Maybe it was slightly, but there wasn't enough. We didn't see enough of it. And I think we were all tired of the Eberflus era. So we're just glad he's gone and excited for what Ben Johnson brings to this team.
No question.
Greg, as always, man, I hope you enjoy your 4th of July weekend. Any plans other than eating the ribs this weekend? Anything you guys are doing?
I don't know what we got going tomorrow. My kids were supposed to come to town today, but that got postponed. So they'll be coming in a few weeks. So I don't know what the hell we got going.
That's awesome, man. Well,
you know what it's like. You take the orders and you do them. Yes, sir. I'm doing it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yep. I appreciate you, Greg, man. As always, pleasure to have you on here and bear down, brother.
Okay, buddy.
I appreciate everyone who watches. Stay tuned, guys. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss out. Hit that like button for me. And until next time, bear down.